The information presented in this podcast is for educational purposes only and is not meant to be a substitute for clinical mental health treatment. If you or someone you know is experiencing a mental health crisis, please dial 988 or head to your nearest emergency room. Welcome to the Black People Die by Suicide 2 podcast, where we discuss all things mental health with an emphasis on suicide in the Black community. I am your co-host, Jordan, and today, you guys, I am flying solo. T-Kea is not with me, but it's all right. She is taking a break for herself. I'm gonna need all of us to give her a little hand clap. She'll be back with us soon. Really excited for her to come back, but glad that she's taking some time to refill her cup. So if this is your first time here, welcome. If you are coming back for a subsequent episode, thank you so much for your continued support. So this podcast is all about talking about suicide in the Black community and raising awareness for the issue, because too many of us think that this doesn't apply to us. But in fact, it does. So at the start of every episode, like usual, we do a check-in just to talk about how we're feeling, because too often we say that we're fine or we're good, and we're not fine and we're not good. But that's just the way that we're socialized here in America, to answer politely. But we're trying to give voice to how we actually feel. And we're also going to get into our psychological fortitude. For those of us who have been listening for a while, you know, this was coined by the esteemed Dr. Rita Walker. And your psychological fortitude is basically like SPF for your mental health. So it's how much protection you have to withstand the stressors and pressures of life. And you're basically going to give yourself a score at any given time, with 0 being, I absolutely can't do this, I have no will to go on, and 10 being, I am functioning at my highest level of self and nothing can knock me down in this moment. So I will get into my check-in, and then just so you all know, I am not completely by myself. I have a special guest today, which I will introduce to you all after I do my check-in. And yeah, let's get into it. So today, I'm actually feeling really optimistic. And this is a big change for me, because I think for those of you who have been listening the past couple of episodes, I told y'all I was really down bad and in the dumps. But I'm feeling really optimistic. I think part of it's the time of year. This is just a happier time of year for me. But I'm also doing a lot better with my mental health, which I'm really excited about. So for my psychological fortitude score, I would say I'm like a good 7.5. And y'all know that's a big deal, because I was at like a 3, a 4 over the summer, but it's getting better. So that's how I'm doing. Let me introduce y'all to our wonderful guest. So on this episode, we are joined by WyKisha McKinney. She is a suicide loss survivor who has also navigated her own battle with depression and anxiety. So WyKisha is an advocate for suicide prevention, and she's trained countless volunteers and community members on how to recognize the signs and risk factors of suicide, which we know is huge because a lot of people don't know what to look out for. So WyKisha is a highly sought after speaker on surviving suicide loss, and she's been featured in documentaries, books, and television interviews on this topic. She is also an entrepreneur, a social entrepreneur at that. She owns the Twin Tea Company, which is an online tea shop that gives part of its proceeds to the suicide prevention cause. WyKisha also volunteers for Black People Die by Suicide too, so we're really excited to have her. WyKisha, how are you doing today? And can you share your psychological fortitude score from 0 to 10?
Okay, I'm doing well today. I'm feeling pretty rested. I like you. The fall is my season. This is a great time of year for me, and so I'm probably at about an 8. I could use a nap, but that's just the time of day. Uh, for me. But I'm doing really well. I enjoy this time of year. Halloween is my favorite holiday, so I'm all buzzed and getting my scary movie feel. So I'm happy.
Yes, you know what? I'm so glad you said that. I was watching like all the classic scary movies. Like I saw it the other day,
Mm-hmm.
and I saw the one with the car. What's the car's name?
Christine.
Christine. There it
Yes.
is.
Yes.
So yes, this is also one of my favorite holidays. I love this time of year. So
I do
I'm glad
too.
that we're both doing well right
Yes.
now.
Yes.
Um yeah, so we have WyKisha here. Today's episode, we're going to talk about discussing losing a loved one to suicide and then the journey of healing for suicide loss survivors. So, a suicide loss survivor is someone who has lost a friend, a family
Mm-hmm.
member, a loved one to suicide. And it's estimated that for every death by suicide, there are about 6 to 8 people who are left behind to grieve.
Mm-hmm.
And some suicidologists even think that that's a very conservative number. So there's actually a lot more people that aren't being accounted for here. But Wakisha's going to get into her story. So if you could just tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Sure. So, it's just kind of beyond the bio that you gave. As you mentioned, I'm a survivor of suicide loss, and so my brother died by suicide in 2004. And from there, I had to go through this really complicated grief process. That was my first time really dealing with grief so closely. And it was also my first time. It was the first bout of depression that I would experience, complicated grief, all the things, post traumatic stress, all the things that come with a suicide death. And so my response to that was, did definitely try to get help and sought help. And so I went to therapy and did all the work, but really found a lot of my healing in finding a purpose and really getting involved in the work. And so, yeah, for the past 20 years, that's what I've been doing.
You know what? I'm glad that you mentioned that suicide is such a complex grief for loved ones left behind
Right.
because not only is there just the loss of that person's life, but there's often a lot of questions that are left behind.
Yeah.
Some people feel like maybe there's some signs that they've missed. Maybe there's something they could have done to prevent that. So it's a very, very common feeling among
Yes.
people who have
Lots of
experienced
guilt.
loss in this way. Yes.
Yeah. Lots of guilt and the unanswered why.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. So your brother, Johnny Madison,
That's
can you
right.
tell us a little bit about him?
Oh gosh, Johnny, let's see. So he was about 27 when he passed. And so he was a really smart guy. He was in grad school and pharmacy school at Texas Southern University, and he was a cheerleader at TSU. And it's funny because I just came across some old homecoming Texas Southern University pictures, and he was in them, and so I laughed about that. He was a handsome guy, and he was a pretty man. Like he was just a really good looking guy. And he didn't have a problem with letting people know that he was aware that he was a good looking guy. Love my son. He enjoyed being an uncle, and really enjoyed giving back to the community. He was a case manager for men who were newly diagnosed with HIV and AIDS. And he was very heavily involved in the LGBTQ community. He was gay. And so very heavily involved in the Black gay community in Houston, Texas, and just really, just all out social guy and, fun and fun to hang around. He got on my nerves, but that's the kind of the tendency of brother and sister. He was the oldest of us. And so, but I was the bossier one. And so we kind of butt heads every now and again.
Yes. So it sounds like your brother was very involved in the helping professions and loved to give
Yes.
back to other
Hmm.
people.
Hmm.
Yeah.
He was
Um.
planning to prior to, he was also HIV positive, and so prior to
Mhm.
getting too sick, he was planning to, his ultimate plan was to go to Canada to try to work with pharmacies in Canada at the time, to help to find new medications for HIV AIDS, which have advanced so by leaps and bounds over the years. But back then, the medications just were not as good as they could have been, and he wanted to contribute to that.
I see. Um, did your brother, did you know him to have any struggles with his mental health prior to his passing?
Yes,
Okay.
because he had a suicide attempt. I said we had, because I was there with him, but he had a
Mhm.
suicide attempt prior to that, and so that was the first time we really kind of started having discussion and conversation about mental health issues.
Mm.
But his mental health was, or his challenge and his attempt was related to, or connected to, him testing positive for HIV. And so, and even in that process, with dealing with the trauma of being HIV positive and the social isolation and all of those things, I don't think that he ever connected the dots that this is creating a mental health issue for me. It was more so
Mhm.
like, of course, I'm sad that I'm positive, and so this is just what it is, kind of thing, kind of mindset.
Okay. So I guess when he did start to experience some challenges, how did your family or the people in your life respond? And I only ask that because I know for myself,
Hmm.
when I finally started to experience some mental health challenges due to some traumatic things that happened in my childhood, my family was like, girl, if you don't pull
If you don't
yourself
stop,
together, and it's not
it's
that
not.
simple,
Yeah,
it's not a
it's
light
not at all.
switch.
Not at
Um,
all.
how did people respond to that?
I think that our family was very, considering the fact that kind of all of this culminated with him testing positive. Our family
Mhm.
was very attentive to the fact that this was just a very sensitive issue all around. And then, of course, we found out about everything after his first attempt. So we were already hyper aware that he was struggling. Um,
Mhm.
and I'm grateful for that because it gave us a level of empathy and understanding that I don't think we would have had we not had the full picture of everything. And like you said, many people are like, "Oh, you just need to get over this or whatever,"
Yeah.
and those things. But we're talking about a terminal illness here back then, so this isn't something we can
Mhm.
just get over. We have to address this as a family. But also, with him, he was very, when he was in his kind of more difficult stages of depression, it was very obvious. You could see it.
Mm.
He slept all the time. He was always tired. He wasn't eating very much. He wasn't taking his medications, which means he would get sick. And so there were some things that we could pick up on. But even with that, the struggle was, we would ask him, "Are you okay? And how are you feeling?" "Oh, I'm good. I'm just tired." Or "It's just the medication." He always had an excuse. Meanwhile, he was really dealing with a lot of trauma, a lot of depression, and a lot of pain.
Yeah, it's really hard
Mhm.
to talk about those things sometimes, even when people directly ask. And I'm sure for him, it probably felt even more complicated given that he was experiencing some health issues as
Yeah.
well,
Mhm.
physically. After his passing, it's my understanding that you also experienced some mental health challenges yourself
Absolutely. Mhm.
afterwards. What was that like for you after he passed away, for you and your family?
You know, so I think for me, and I always explain this to folks, which I know now was a trauma response. The
Mm-hmm.
year that he died, I don't have very much memory.
Mm-hmm.
I can remember bits and pieces, and some things will come back about that year, but I honestly can't tell you the things that happened day to day. There are some very significant moments that I remember. Like, I remember um the day that what my turning point was, when I decided to get up and try to get some help and, really try to come out of this depression. I remember, things about my son and stuff like that, but I don't have a lot of memory of that year at all. And so, going to therapy and getting help, they was like, that's a trauma response. And as you are working on your trauma and on your pain, some of these things will come back. And so some of my memories are coming back, and some of the memories of that time are coming back, and some are easy to deal with and some are still very, very painful. Um, but I think so my parents live in Dallas, and so I'm in Houston. And so they didn't see the day-to-day stuff for me. So they didn't they I honestly, I'm not sure if they were even fully aware just how much I was struggling at that time. My now husband was, he actually moved in with me and was pretty much taking care of me. He and my son, who's now 24, he was turning 4 at the time, and so they were home with me. And I think, and in hindsight, I think it was very difficult for them. And my husband and I, we were still very new in our relationship at the time. And so for him to kind of take on that burden, and I'll be honest, sometimes I feel guilt about that, but I'm also very grateful for him for taking that on and taking care of me and taking care of my son. And so, and I, without him and without my baby, I'll be honest, I probably wouldn't be here.
Mm. So after your brother's passing, did you ever feel so low that you considered suicide yourself?
Absolutely.
Mm.
Absolutely. And then,
Mm.
like I said, and that's my turning point day. That was a day that it was just followed by days of not sleeping. It was followed by days of constantly just ruminating, negative thoughts ruminating in my mind. I was very fixated on the fact that I felt like my brother was suffering, even in death. And I couldn't do anything about it. So that made me feel so very helpless. And like many survivors of suicide loss, I was feeling extremely guilty and blaming myself for his death. Um, and because I saw him the night before he passed. And so I, in my mind, I missed something. And so I failed as a sister. And so I had to really work through all of that. And it did get to a place where it was like, okay, I just need to forget everything that happened. Let me just forget it all. And the best way to forget it, if I can go to sleep enough or if I can sleep long enough to forget it all, then I'll be okay. So the thought wasn't, and I want to emphasize this for folks who've never experienced suicidal thinking. The thought was never, I want to die. Not for me. The thought was, I just need to stop thinking about this and I need to stop hurting. So the doctors had given me medication for anxiety. They gave me antidepressant medication. They gave me sleeping pills. They gave me a lot of pills. And so for me, it was like, well, maybe if I take enough and sleep enough, I'll wake up and it'll all be over. It'll all be gone. And so fortunately, I didn't attempt, thank goodness, but it did definitely get to a place where it was, let's think about what else I can do, because I tried therapy for a little bit. I had some bad experiences with therapy. I tried going to church, had
Mhm.
some bad experiences with that. I just didn't have any good experiences trying to find help, and so I found myself in a place where it was just like there is no help. And so I'm again grateful for my husband and my son, because my son, it was the motivator. This little 3-year-old was encouraging me to get up and move, and my husband was encouraging me to get up and get some help so I can be better for them. And so that really was a big motivator for me to continue to go, and also, to continue to move forward and not attempt. And also for me, I didn't want to leave my baby here to feel what I was feeling. Like that was the worst thing that I could think
Mm.
about. So I was like, yeah, I got to get better. I got to get myself together because I can't leave my child. And so that was the big motivator to push me to a place where I could be open to receiving help and just continuing to push through.
I think that's a very common experience from what I've heard from other people who have also considered suicide, like
Mhm.
myself,
Mhm.
where it's not even so much that death is the end goal. We just really want the pain to stop.
Right.
And especially when you've tried therapy, you've
Yeah.
tried going to church. And I would imagine that back during that time, there probably wasn't nearly as many resources as there are now,
Not
especially for
no.
Black people.
No, no.
Hmm.
And that was one of the things that motivated me to get involved in the work, because the more I'm trying to find, because one of the things that survivors of suicide loss will do, we will fixate on trying to find the answer, and there's not an answer. And so our way of doing that is, let's do some research. Let's learn all we can about suicide. Let's call and contact. And I called medical examiners. I called doctors. I called his friends. Like I became a whole investigator, and the more I tried to find help, the more frustrated I got, because the only research that was available back then that talked about Black people and suicide was about 15 to 20 years old. And I was like, and then the answers that I'm getting from people is, oh, I didn't know Black people did that, or Black people don't die by suicide. And I'm like, well, we can't be the only ones. Like we can't, like, I know it's some European in our DNA, but it's not, that's not the connection. What is this? And so I got involved in the work simply because I didn't want any other family to be frustrated and mad and feel like they're by themselves because they can't find nothing. And so immediately started, I went from researching to try to find an answer to doing research to become the answer. And
Mm.
so and just really got to work and have been working ever since.
So tell me a little bit about that work, what that means to you to be able to use your story and your brother's story to encourage other people and educate other people on this
Yeah.
issue. Um, Particularly for us, do you get a lot
Yes.
of off the wall comments or anything as you're out there doing your work?
Not as much now as I used to,
Okay.
which means people are learning more, and I'm grateful. I'm so
Yeah.
grateful. But initially, oh, I got all the dumb stuff. I got all of it. All the things that we hear about people saying, I got all of it. I got, was he on drugs? Were your parents abusive? You must not have had it. Y'all must not have had a father in your life. All not true. Was he hospitalized? Like how crazy was he? What you mean? I got a lot of people pushing me to ask for, to give them details on how he died, which everybody who's watching this, that is so rude. Don't ask nobody that. Like it's
Hmm.
just common courtesy. Don't ask people that. It's really triggering, and it's
Hmm.
making me relive my trauma when you ask that. And so, but now I'm very much so able to say, no, I don't feel comfortable with sharing that detail. It is triggering for me, and it's not helpful for me to relive that. But back then, I kind of felt in a corner, like I had to answer those questions. Yeah, so I got all the, when my experience with the church, actually, I went to church to ask for help because again, I was fixating on the fact that I felt like my brother was still suffering. So I wanted to talk to somebody in ministry that could help me make sense of what it makes sense of any of this and how I could cope with it. And the response was, we don't deal with suicides. You have to find somewhere else to go. So, and I'm saying that in a very nice and polite way because that's not how it was delivered to me. And that turned me away from the church for a very long time.
Hmm.
And it's still, I still have a little bit of anxiety about really being heavily involved in churches because of that. And a couple of other things related to church trauma. But those experiences, like I said, I got, you go through this phase of grief, or you go through this phase of pain where you just completely numb out. And so for me, I stopped reacting to things. And it
Hmm.
wasn't until I started feeling better and kind of coming out on that, it wasn't until after that turning point and I started coming out of it, that I was like, that really pissed me off. Like, like, I can't believe she said that to me, and I was like, what on earth? Why would anybody say that? And so I just got to work. I started working. And I'm very glad to say that very same church, I stepped into those doors for the first time in about 15 years, a few years ago, and they have an entire counseling center and they provide services to their members for free. And I never said anything to the church members or to anybody there about my experience. I just explained to them that I am so grateful that they provide these services to their community now. And so I'm excited that the progress that's been made in communities, especially in Black communities, with addressing mental health and addressing suicide, have definitely advanced from where they were in 2004. Now there's still a lot more work to be done, but we
Oh, yeah.
definitely not where we used to be.
I'm really glad that they decided to implement that. I actually mm, have a recent enough story about church. Back right before the pandemic started, this was maybe like February 2020. I went
So right
to
before.
right before I went to a service that my church was having, and I remember my pastor. I don't even remember what the sermon was about, but he was on a roll. You know how
Mhm.
Baptist pastor,
Yeah.
if they get going, they worked up.
Yep.
And he said, "You don't need a therapy. Like you need to just get down on your knees and pray." And I remember like everybody around me just hopped up and they're like, "Amen, amen." And I remember saying out loud, "This is so irresponsible." And I felt
Yeah.
bad for anyone who was there who didn't know that it's okay to love God and also
And also go to
seek the
therapy.
people
Hmm.
that he put here to help us. It just it angered me so much that I didn't go back until Easter this
Hmm.
year. And
Hmm.
even when I went back, it just didn't feel
It's
right.
uncomfortable.
And
Yeah, it was
I
uncomfortable.
I'm really, really glad that that church took steps to make this a priority because it
Yeah.
really is affecting a lot of us,
Yes.
especially youth and kids. And that's a
Yes.
whole nother thing because
Yes.
people in our community, we think that kids don't have real
Very
problems, but
dismissive of their feelings, you know. And so I'm
yeah,
learning as a parent of a young adult
yeah.
and a parent, or a
Hmm.
parent of two young adults now. Yeah, both of my babies are grown. So, as a parent of two young adults now, I'm learning how, as parents, we have to remember what it was like to be the 13-year-old girl who finally caught feelings for that boy,
Hmm.
or for that person, and just how serious it was for them.
Yep.
And we have to remind ourselves of that. Yeah, it's been several years since I've seen 13, but I know what that feeling was. And so what didn't help is, oh, you'll get over it. You'll have another boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever tomorrow. It's all right. Oh, that's you being dramatic or whatever. Yes, they are. But for them, they're experiencing so many emotions that they don't know how to put names to, and they don't know how to address. So the
Yep.
best thing that you can do as a parent, instead of being dismissive, teach them coping skills from a young age. Teach them how to cope so that when they're 17 and 18, they know how to deal with whatever stress or strain that comes with being a 17 or 18-year-old. And even as young adults, I can honestly say, even with my kids as young adults now, they're still my kids and we're still learning.
Hmm.
We're still learning how to cope with adult world and adult issues, and adult things. And so we still, as a parent, now I'm on a level where I can kind of be a peer and coach them in a different kind of way,
Yeah.
but we do have to stop being so dismissive of our kids' feelings. Our kids, these little boogers are smart. And so they know, and also because a lot of families, especially adults, they always want to hide things from the kids, like they don't know that mom and dad are stressed, or
Hmm.
they don't know that mom is upset. And so one of the things I do think was very helpful is sharing with my kids when I was grieving and what grief looks like and what I do to take care of myself. And my kids, they went everywhere with me when I was working in suicide prevention all the time, and volunteering. And so they were voluntold to do all the things mom did. So if I got a crisis hotline training that day, so do you. We finna help set this room up. And so they experienced and learned a lot of things because of that. And I'm grateful for them to have that experience because it has helped them at this stage know how to cope, know how to communicate, and they know that they can come to me with whatever the crisis is, and I will listen.
Yes. So important that we make space for young people and the
Yeah.
kids to talk about what they're going through because I was that kid who grew up. I had a family member who passed away
Hmm.
in like 97, 98. So I was either 7 or 8.
Just seven
And
or eight. Just go ahead and age
that's
me
it.
then, Jordan.
Yeah. Yes, I was born, I'm a 90s baby, born exactly in 1990.
Yeah.
And I I was always told my family member died in a car accident. And it wasn't
Hmm.
until I was like 31 that I found out it was suicide.
Yeah.
No one, I had no
Doesn't
idea.
say a thing. Yep.
And I remember how devastating that was. Like, I immediately burst into tears. At that point, I had been on my own mental health journey for 9 years. And
Hmm.
it just pained me so much to know that he was suffering like that. And I had no idea.
Yeah.
Um, it's a lot to lose a loved one.
It
Out of
is.
curiosity, I am going to ask you how you're
Sure.
prioritizing your mental health today, but I
Absolutely.
am curious. In the work that you've been doing with advocacy, have you found any resources or programs that were especially helpful to you as a
Yeah.
family member that you might be
Hmm.
able to pass on to any of our listeners?
Absolutely. So, one of the first organizations that I came across, two organizations I came across, which are the larger organizations back then, were American Association of Suicidology and the
Mhm.
American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. And so, through AFSP is where I really got a lot. done. Through
Mm-hmm.
AFSP, I became a board member. I was one of the founding board members for the AFSP chapter here in Houston, and really got engaged in the work. But a couple of things that were super helpful was the survivor of suicide loss support groups.
Mm-hmm.
And really not for me directly, because SOS groups really weren't my thing, but facilitating them were wonderful for me.
Mm-hmm.
Because I got to hear ideas from folks without having to really divulge a whole lot.
Right.
So it was my safe space to be running stuff pretty much, to be running things as opposed to being a part of the participants. But also, I took my son to grief therapy. He was 3.5, going on 4 at the time, and it's hard to find grief therapy for kids. It's
Right.
hard to find groups for kids, but there is an organization here called Bo's Place, and they actually took him in, and they usually didn't accept kids until they were 5, but they took him in because he was very articulate and well spoken and could communicate his feelings well, and they were like, "Oh, I think he'll do fine with the 5-year-olds," and so we went to those groups, and they were very helpful for him. So definitely, the support groups for kids is useful because they get to be around other children, even if it's just a grief support group, just a place where
Mm-hmm.
they can be around other folks where they don't feel odd, or feel weird for having lost somebody, or they're experiencing the feelings that they're feeling. And the out of the darkness walks were very helpful as well.
Yeah.
So I say that to say, if you can find common groups, and you can find those groups to connect with, and those people to connect with, that have similar experiences. You don't have to always sit and talk about your loss, but sometimes it's helpful just to be with people who have had the experience. And so I encourage you to do that. I encourage anyone who has gone through this experience to definitely seek out those groups, be it support groups, out of the darkness walks, kids groups, meetups, whatever you can do. And like I said, it doesn't have to always be sorrow and sadness. I think one of the things that I have been able to do well is bring some joy and bring happiness to this work, so people don't feel like this is going to be daunting for me to go to. This is going to be emotional and all of and it is going to be all of those things, just simply because of what it is. But you can also find some joy in it as well. And so, those resources were just so very helpful. And then, finding opportunities to volunteer, which is what AFSP also gave me. And they let me take it and run with it. And so, so they did. And I'm so grateful to them for that. I'm still very grateful to that organization, and I'll forever support them for that.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Y'all know how I feel. For the listeners who've been around here for a while, y'all know how I feel about a good support group. So you didn't just hear from me, you got it from WyKisha as well. So
Yes,
thank you for
yes.
sharing that.
Yeah,
I
because
always
I mean,
encourage.
the research and studies show, like, those circles and those connect groups are the things that help to save lives. That's one of the reasons why Black women have low suicide rates, because we have our
Yes.
sister circle. We always got a group of people we're gonna go and talk to, And so, not saying that we don't. So I definitely don't want to perpetuate the Black Superwoman persona, because that's not the case. But it does help for us to have that network of support.
Yes. So how are you prioritizing your mental health today?
Oh, let's see. So a couple of things. I'm actually in the process of seeking out a new therapist. My therapist recently retired. And I will say I'm a big advocate for therapy. I'm a big advocate for, regular checkups. You may not need intensive therapy every week, but you need to check in with somebody every now and again. And most insurances cover mental health care now. Well, I would say, well, all insurance is required to cover mental health care. But some insurance is better than others. So check
Yes.
out your insurance first, before you go and seek out a therapist. I do still give myself time to reserve time to, if I happen to be grieving or something is on my mind, to acknowledge that grief, and be able to move forward. I make sure that I sleep. My bedtime. Anybody that knows me well, they know my bedtime is 9:30, 10 o'clock at the latest. It's to the point where my dog before he passed away knew the schedule, and so about 9:15 he go sit at the stairs and wait for me, because we're going to bed. We're both, he was old too, so we all going to bed. So I do allow myself to get rest. I go outside. I love to be outside. Nature is church for me. That's
Mm.
where I really feel God's presence. That's where I really feel peace. That's where I really feel good energy. And so I like to be with, I'm obsessed with trees, Jordan. It's sad. Like, it's
Mm.
really bad. I have an issue with trees. Like, I just love them. They're beautiful and they're big and they're just amazing. And so I like to, there's a nature center, a nature conservancy just not far from me, about 10 minutes. And I love to just go there and just go sit, because it just gives me so much peace. So, doing the things that bring me that peace, having moments for quiet, spending time with my puppy. I don't know what convinced me to get this puppy, because we were becoming empty nesters. Our dogs are old, our kids are leaving, like we were getting there, and then we go and get this brand new, 10-week-old puppy, and he is just he's a ball of energy, but he keeps me busy. He keeps me up. He makes sure that I'm not just sitting around. We argue. It's something to keep my mind busy, and I write. I love to write, and not like journaling. Journaling has never kept my attention, but I do love to write fiction stories and short stories. And so lately I've been working on a book. And so that's what's been helping me.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
You know what? I feel very seen, very heard, very understood. I
Yes.
am a fellow tree lover, nature lover. I tell people all the time, like, I feel God's embrace in like the sun hitting my skin
Yep.
and feeling the breeze, like
Hmm.
the smell of the trees, especially this time of year when the leaves are changing and just
You can just see it.
saying,
It feels different. And
yes,
maybe that's why this time of year is so great for us, because we can
yes.
literally see nature, right? We can see the changes, and it's exciting for me to see that. But I encourage anybody, if you really just need to lift your spirits real quick, you need to do something. Go outside, even in the summertime. Well, in Texas,
Hmm.
be careful with that, but go early, and put a hat on, because the humidity is gonna get you. But go and find a wooded area and find a place where you can just sit, and just sit there and close your eyes and listen to those trees and listen to that wind and listen to
Mm.
all the things that's happening right then and there, and just sit there until you can't sit there anymore, and then just check in and how you feel. I have gone in times where my grief was really taking over, because I will say, even though it's been 20 years, there are times when my grief is still very heavy, and very hard. I have been able to go into those woods. I have a special little place that's tucked away, and go into that nature conservancy, and I go there and I can cry for a few minutes, but by the time I leave there, I'm a whole different person. And so I have to be outside. I need to be out there, and I can acknowledge, and I will say and can acknowledge that one of the ways that I can identify that I may be experiencing an episode of depression is that I don't want to go outside. I don't
Hmm.
want to.
Hmm.
So summertime is very hard because it's hot. And so while some people experience seasonal affective disorder in the wintertime, I experience it in the summer, because I'm not going to sit outside and sweat and sunburn for nobody, But I still try to make myself go out when I can. So it's early in the morning, or when the sun is going down at night, or when the seasons are a little cooler and more tolerable. But when I'm in other places, like when I go to Colorado, I got to find somewhere to go, because the weather is
Hmm.
always nice. So, or it's always been nice while I was there. So, definitely nature. Nature is the way that I prioritize my mental health. And it's really just making sure that I reserve time, no exceptions. This is what I need to do to take care of myself today. So it's not a rush of reminding myself that I don't have to rush and prioritize anybody else's things if I don't want to. It's okay to say no, and no has become one of my favorite words. I love it.
So you are also my kindred spirit, because my other favorite thing, probably a little bit after nature, is tea. So we got to talk about twin tea. Now listen,
Yes.
black, green, white, herbal,
Herbal
oolong. I
oolong
like it
clear.
all. I like it
All the
all.
things.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes. Tell me about twin tea.
So the 20 company, I started the 20 company in 2017. I've worked in nonprofit my entire professional life. And so I got my master's degree in nonprofit management. And then I started questioning my life choices. And so, because I was like, I need some money and I work in nonprofit and I have student loan debt. And so what am I about to do? But also I was questioning my life choices, because what a lot of people don't know, if you don't work in the nonprofit industry, a lot of people don't understand that when you launch a nonprofit, it's not yours to own. it is a public organization and it's not owned by anyone. And your board of directors, if you're not careful and have a really careful agreement with your board of directors, even as a founder, your board can boot you. And
Mhm.
so for me, as much as I love nonprofit, as big as my heart is, and as much as I would love to take care of other people, I'm just not that big a person. I'm not going to put all my money, time, and energy into a business for somebody to take it from me. No, I'll shut it all down. And I was like, no, there's just no. So I started doing some research and thinking about, what I wanted to do. I had been a fan of Tom's Shoes, that business model. Because so Tom's Shoes is a social enterprise where they do one for one. For every pair of shoe that you buy, they donate a pair of shoes to, and now they do glasses also. And then there were other companies like Newman's Own. So Newman's Own food products that are in the grocery stores, that's 100% nonprofit. Everything you buy from Newman's Own goes to charity.
Oh, I didn't
Um,
know that.
that's 100% nonprofit, and so most companies who give to charity, they'll give 1% or 2% of their profit for social causes. I wanted something a little bit more impactful. I wanted something a little bit, I wanted to be able to build a business that was really going to put a dent into the issues and the gaps of care for suicide care. And so the best way to do that, and work as I work in nonprofit, but I do acknowledge the fact that nonprofits don't run for free. They have bills. And so you have to make some money for those nonprofits. And so I wanted to be able to do that. And so I used to go to lunch at this tea room all the time that was across the street from my job. And I noticed, I was like, dang, this lady is always busy. There's always a wait for lunch. She had a wall of loose leaf teas, and not one bag of tea in there was less than $15. And I was like, who is spending $15 on tea? Everybody in this room. Yes, right. And so literally, Jordan, I'm sitting at the table and I'm eating my lunch, and I started Googling the tea industry, tea retails. Tea is one of the fastest growing industries in the world, second consumed beverage in the world, next to
Yes.
water. I thought coffee and soda would come before tea, but no, tea is the most consumed beverage next to water. And so I was like, okay, I'm gonna sell some tea. And so, because the cause was already there, I already knew what I wanted to do in terms of the cause, but I was like, okay, I'm gonna sell some tea. So I came home and told my business husband, my entrepreneur husband, I was like, dear, I want to sell some tea. He was like, what? He was like, what? Why are you? He's like, you drink coffee. You're not even a tea drinker like that. I was like, I like tea. He was like, not like that. So, but we talked about it and we discussed it. And then I said to him, I'm going to give 20% of my profit to suicide prevention. And he was like, 20? Why are we doing 20? And I was like, because again, I want to put a dent in, because suicide is so underfunded. And suicide prevention work has always been historically underfunded. And so I want to put a dent in it. And also, I want to make sure that a good sum of money goes toward preventing and understanding and studying suicide in Black communities. And so the best way for me to do that, and this is a bit of a capitalist mindset, but it is the reality of the world that we live in. The best way to do that is to control the money. And
Mhm.
so if I can write a big enough check, then I can make some influences. And so that's my theory behind giving 20%. But also, tea in and of itself has properties in it that are good for the brain, that are wonderful for your body, that actually help to lift your spirits, that actually help with anxiety, that help with sleeping issues and things like that. So that made it a great product. And then finally, it fosters that connection. It supports human connection that has been shown in studies to prevent suicide. If you are connected with people, and oftentimes when people are like, hey, let's get together, let's talk, it's either let's go have some wine or let's have some tea. So I went the tea route. And so, yeah, so we're still in business. That's still my baby. We support Black People Die by Suicide too. We have a tea party every year. We sell a variety of teas, loose leaf teas, health and wellness teas, your everyday Earl Greys and things like that. Like you said, black, white, green, pu'er, we got all of it. And we have samplers. And so if you're new to tea drinking and you don't know what your palate is yet, I would encourage you to get a sampler and try all of them, just to get a feel. Because I have run into a lot of people like, oh, tea is nasty, I don't like it. I was like, you just haven't found the one you like yet. My husband was
Nope.
like that, and now he's a tea drinker. And we have a few friends that was like, "Ooh, I don't like tea." And it's like, maybe black tea is not your thing. Let's try a green tea, or let's try a herbal tea. And so I have a few people, that I have converted now to tea drinkers. So
Yes. I bought a new tea mug last night, so y'all know what? I am
we're gonna
breaking
have to
that
get you
bad boy
some.
in tonight. Yes, I'm breaking
Yes.
that thing in tonight.
Awesome. 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 And if you visit my website at www.the20company.com, and that's spelled TWENTEA, then you'll see all the teas that we have. You'll also see some of the swag we have. We have mugs, we have t-shirts, we have all the things. And so I encourage you all to check it out. And if you find yourself in Houston in March, come to the tea party.
Yes, I will have all of WyKisha's information in the show notes or the description box.
Nice.
What's next for you? How can people find you?
Yes. So you can find me I'm on all the socials. My personal, and I don't mind sharing my personal, because if you Google my name, it's gonna pop up anyway. So but my personal, you can find me at Keisha Got the Tea. On Instagram, Facebook, X, and TikTok. You can find the 20 Company at 20Co on Facebook and Instagram as well. And then if you can't find on any of those things, again, Google my name. I promise it'll pop up. So like, and I'm not saying that to be braggadocious or to be overly, like, to have the big head, but literally if you Google my name, it will pop up. And it's not a lot of WyKishas in the world. We're coming up, but I promise you'll find me.
WyKisha, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for volunteering with us. It really
Oh,
means a
it has
lot.
been such a pleasure. It has been such a pleasure, and I really support what you all are doing. Very proud of what you all are doing, and I'm looking forward to us, raising some money together and making Black people die by suicide just as large as AFSP and bigger, and all the things. So super happy to be with y'all.
Thank you. Any last words for someone who's listening who has lost someone to suicide? Anything that you want to leave to encourage them?
It is okay to be happy. It is okay to continue to live. You're not going to forget your loved one. Find the funniest, silliest story that you can about them. And when you find yourself grieving or getting upset, think about that story. I shake my head at quite a few things that my brother used to do. He was a first class grade A klutz. And so he was the person that he doesn't just stump his toe, he has to go get stitches. And so we have plenty to talk about and think about with him. And so, and when you find yourself getting frustrated and angry, talk to him. They listening. And so he's gotten an earful from me a couple of times. So just hang in there, and really, it really is a learning process. Your grief will come and go. There's no time limit on it. And you just have to work on what works best for you, and just stay in prayer as much as you can.
WyKisha, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you
I
for
will.
having me. I'm so grateful for you.
Thanks. All right. So thank you, WyKisha, for joining us. Thank you so much for coming to talk about your brother. Um, it just makes this work real. Seriously. It's so easy to be detached from it, but suicide is really impacting us. And we think that's why it's so important to have people on to talk about their personal experiences, to talk about their losses, even their stories of recovery. It just really draws attention to the issue. And one of the ways in which we do that on our podcast, of course, is the spotlight segment. So every episode, we like to highlight someone who has passed away from suicide as a way of just keeping their memory alive and honoring them. It's such a heavy topic, but I'm honored that we have an opportunity to really just draw attention to it. So today I am spotlighting LaQuantae Jackson. He was a student at Kentucky State University and an expectant father. He died by suicide on September 28th, 2021, at the age of 22. And for this episode's resource, the Alliance of Hope works to decrease stigma, increase understanding of the suicide loss experience, and provide direct support to survivors. They provide online healing support and other services for people who are coping with devastating loss to suicide. You can find more information on the Alliance of Hope at allianceofhope.org. And there's also many other organizations that have services or draw attention specifically for survivors of suicide loss. There's NAMI, there's 988, as WyKisha said, the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. So I will leave as many links as I possibly can in the description box in the show notes for you all to check out resources. I know NAMI has family support groups that you can attend. Sounds like AFSP also has resource groups that you can attend. So, again, I will link as much information as possible for anyone who's listening and you've lost someone, just for you to find support. I try to give as much as I can in terms of resources so that people don't feel like they're alone. And for today's community change maker, I am highlighting Solomon Thomas. So he is number 4 on the New York Jets defensive end. He uses his platform to raise awareness for suicide prevention after losing his sister, Ella Thomas, to suicide. And Solomon is one of the co founders of The Defensive Line, which is a nonprofit that raises awareness for suicide prevention in Ella's honor. I think we talked about The Defensive Line on a previous episode, but this is shouting out Solomon just for using his platform to raise awareness for suicide, especially as a man. That's huge. Thank you so much for your work. Thank you for helping spread awareness. We hope that someone looks at your platform and they feel inspired to get help or inspired to find connection if they are considering suicide or they've lost someone to suicide. So thank you for that. And our favorite segment.
Oh
Oh
my
my
God.
God. The foolishness, as WyKisha mentioned when she first started doing prevention work, you'll hear all kinds of things. Sometimes people mean well, but it just doesn't hit, it doesn't come out right. And this is one of those things. I see this a lot online. So it wasn't really suicide. Like their death had to be from another cause. So sometimes there's a lot of conspiracy, a lot of disbelief. And I say that in a very respectful manner, as respectful as I possibly can, because I do understand that loss from suicide is traumatic. And as WyKisha mentioned, there is a lot of guilt associated with it. So maybe it's easier for people to, I don't know, digest or process death in a different way other than suicide. But I think it also perpetuates the stigma that Black people don't die from suicide, that they must have died from something else. But the reality is that so many of us are affected, whether we have suicide attempts and live, suicide attempts and pass away. So many of us are affected by this. Um, and the idea that it just couldn't, it could be anything but suicide kind of perpetuates that stigma. So that's this week's. Oh my God. It feels so funny saying that without T-Kea here. But moving on to my favorite, not my favorite section, which is self-care. But you know what? I can't even hate on self-care this time because I'm actually doing some things that are pretty helpful. As LaQuantae mentioned, I'm spending more time out in nature. Prior to recording this episode, I took my dog Lucy out um, for our regular walk. And listen, like we're in the DMV, Maryland to be specific. And this time of year, the air is crisp. There's a nice breeze. The smell of nature, the leaves are changing. This is one of my favorite times to be outside. Even though I like being outside pretty much all the time, with the exception of summer, because I hate summer. But this time of year, I love being outside. And I'm going to try to spend more time out. I'm hoping that I can get my dog out to the park more. We usually do our walks in the neighborhood, but she does love a good park walk. So I think that's what I'm going to try to do. At least try to get her out maybe every other weekend or so. My dog loves to be outside. She loves a good walk. She loves other people, but she does not love other pets. She will make a fuss if she sees another dog. So sometimes it's a pain to take her out, but for the both of our sake, I'm going to try to get her together and we're going to go out and enjoy some nature together. As usual, y'all, social media, check us out. Instagram. We're on Facebook now. We're on LinkedIn now. All of those links will be in the show notes or the description box. So you can check that out if you want to connect with us there. And for our moment of inspiration, if you are a suicide loss survivor, like WyKisha or Solomon from this episode's community change maker, you don't have to feel alone. There are several resources and organizations that can assist you with navigating your grief and your pain. So please, please, please check out the resources section in the show notes or the description box. Again, I will try to put as much as I can fit in there for you all to check out. I know that suicide loss is such a complex form of grief, and you don't have to go through this alone. So I want to get you connected to some resources that could possibly benefit you and your mental health. So as always, thank you guys for checking in. Fear not, T-Kea will be back soon. Hopefully you all enjoyed this solo episode from your girl, trying to hold down the fort. And until 2 weeks, y'all take care.